The rain didn't just fall that night. It felt like the sky was weeping with me. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the cardboard pizza box in my hands soaked through and turning to mush, much like my life. My name is Jessica, and 10 minutes ago I believed I was the luckiest woman in the world. I was 24, a simple girl from a factory town who had moved to the city with nothing but a dream and a heart full of devotion for a man named Mark. He was everything I wasn't: charming, blue-eyed, and radiating a confidence that made me feel like I finally belonged. For 3 years, I poured every ounce of my soul into him. I worked grueling double shifts at a coffee shop until my back screamed and my feet went numb, just so I could buy him the gifts he wanted and keep his apartment spotless. I thought we were building a future. I thought we were a team. But when I opened his door early that evening to surprise him, the sound that greeted me wasn't a welcome home. It was the high-pitched melodic laughter of another woman. I can still see the scene in slow motion. The soft glow of the living room lamp, the expensive silk dress draped over the chair, and Mark entwined on the sofa with a blonde girl who looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. When the pizza box hit the floor with a dull thud, he didn't look ashamed. He looked inconvenienced. "She's nobody," he told her, his voice cold and sharp as a razor, while I stood there trembling in my cheap uniform. "She's just a girl I know. Jessica, leave. I'm with Cindy now. Her father owns the city. You're nothing." The word nothing echoed in my ears as I ran into the downpour. My chest felt like it had been crushed under a mountain of granite. I walked for hours, my tears mixing with the rain, feeling the sting of a betrayal so deep it felt terminal. For weeks I withered away in a tiny room, staring at the walls, mourning a man who had discarded me like a piece of trash. But then, the grief hit a wall. It curdled into something hotter. Something sharper. I looked in the mirror one morning at my hollowed-out eyes and realized I was done crying. Mark hadn't just broken my heart, he had insulted my existence. He thought I was nothing because I didn't have a bank account to match his ambitions. Fine, I thought. If money is the only language you speak, I'll make sure you hear me loud and clear. I went back to the coffee shop, but I wasn't the same girl. I was a ghost fueled by a quiet, simmering rage. That's when he walked in. He was older, perhaps in his late 40s, with silver hair at his temples and a suit that cost more than my parents made in a year. But it wasn't his wealth that caught me. It was the profound exhaustion in his eyes. His name was Thomas. He was elegant, soft-spoken, and moved with the heavy grace of a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. I started leaving a free cookie on his saucer. "You look like you've had a long day," I'd say. He would smile, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes, and we would talk. He told me about his wife, who had passed a decade ago, about the loneliness of his massive house, and about his son, a boy he had spoiled, a boy who loved money more than people. The turning point came the day he left his wallet on the table. I chased him down the street, breathless. When I handed it back, he looked at me as if I were a miracle. "Most people would have vanished with this," he said. "I'm poor, Thomas," I replied, "but I'm not a thief." He invited me to dinner. He was the perfect gentleman, treating me with a level of respect I didn't know existed. But then, midway through the meal, he pulled out a photograph of his son. The blood drained from my face. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Staring back at me from the glossy paper was Mark. In that moment, a dark, brilliant, and terrifying plan took root in my mind. Mark had left me to climb a social ladder. He wanted a life of luxury. What if I became the person who held the keys to that life? What if I didn't just get over him? What if I became his stepmother? I didn't tell Thomas I knew Mark. I played the role of the perfect companion, and truth be told, it wasn't entirely an act. Thomas was easy to be around. He was the father Mark never deserved. We dated for months, and with every gift he gave me, every fancy dress he bought, I felt the armor of my revenge growing stronger. The night of the reckoning arrived on a Sunday. Thomas invited me to his mansion to finally meet his son. I dressed like a queen in a crimson gown that cost a fortune, my hair pinned up, my makeup flawless. I looked like a woman who had never known the smell of burnt coffee beans or the ache of a 12-hour shift. When we walked into that grand living room, Mark was there, swirling a glass of expensive wine. When his eyes met mine, the glass shattered. Red wine sprayed across the marble floor like a bloodstain. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Mark," Thomas said, oblivious to the electricity in the room, "I want you to meet my girlfriend, Jessica." I stepped forward, my heels clicking rhythmically, and offered a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Hello, Mark," I purred. "It's so lovely to finally meet the son Thomas speaks so highly of." The dinner that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I sat beside Thomas, his hand resting protectively on mine, while Mark sat across from us, unable to swallow a single bite. He was trapped. He couldn't expose our past without admitting to his father what a cruel, cheating person he was, and he couldn't lose his father's inheritance. 6 months later, under a sunset that turned the sky into a canvas of bruised purples and golds, Thomas dropped to one knee in the garden. He held a diamond that caught the light like a star. "You've brought life back into this house, Jessica," he whispered. "Will you marry me?" I thought of Mark. I thought of the way he'd have to call me Mom. I thought of the power I would hold over every cent he spent. "Yes," I said. The wedding was a spectacle of white roses and champagne. Mark was the best man. His hand shook as he handed his father the rings. As I leaned in to receive the traditional kiss on the cheek from my new stepson, I whispered into his ear, "Congratulations, son. Try not to spend your allowance all in one place." I had won. I moved into the mansion. I had the cars, the servants, and the ultimate satisfaction of watching Mark cringe every time I entered a room. But as the weeks turned into months, something I hadn't planned for started to happen. I began to see Thomas not as a weapon of revenge, but as a man who sat with me when I had a nightmare, a man who respected my opinions on his business, a man who was genuinely, deeply good. While Mark spent his nights partying and demanding more money, I stayed home with Thomas. The turning point came when Thomas fell gravely ill with a vicious flu. Mark didn't even visit. He joked about checking back in once the will was read. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I wiped Thomas's brow, I fed him soup, and I really prayed for his recovery. It was then I realized the horrible truth. I had started this out of hate, but I was ending it in love. I loved Thomas more than I had ever loved Mark, because Thomas actually saw me. But the past is a debt that always comes due. Mark, sensing he was being pushed out of his father's heart and wallet, decided to burn the house down. One evening he stood in the living room and spat out the truth. "She's a liar, Dad. We were together for 3 years. She's a gold digger who married you just to get back at me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Thomas looked at me, his eyes searching mine. I didn't deny it. I knelt at his feet, tears streaming down my face. I confessed everything: the pain, the pizza box in the rain, the initial plan for revenge. "I wanted to hurt him, Thomas," I sobbed. "But I ended up loving you. If you want me to go, I'll sign the papers today. I don't want a penny. I just want you to know it became real." Thomas reached out and touched my hair. "I knew, Jessica," he said softly. The world stopped. Mark's jaw dropped. "You knew?" he screamed. "I'm a businessman, Mark," Thomas said, his voice turning to iron as he looked at his son. "I saw the way you looked at her that first night. I saw the history in your eyes. But I also saw the way she looked at me when I was sick. I saw the way she cared for this home. She gave me the one thing you never could: sincerity." Thomas stood up and pointed toward the door. "Jessica is the lady of this house. If you cannot respect your mother, you are welcome to find a life of your own without my support." That was 2 years ago. Mark is gone now, finally working a real job, learning the value of the nothing he once accused me of being. He visits for the holidays, and we are civil. He calls me Jessica, and I call him Mark. As for me, I sit in the garden with Thomas every evening. The anger that once fueled me has evaporated, leaving behind a peace I never thought possible. I learned that revenge is a fire that burns the one who holds it, but love is the rain that finally puts it out. My name is Jessica. I became my ex-boyfriend's stepmother to break his heart, but in the end, I only healed my own.